Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the OTT.X Wednesday webinar series. I'm Eric Hansen from OTT.X and your host for the series. On behalf of the team at OTT.X, I want to thank all of you for joining us this morning to the series where we bring you insightful, thoughtful, thought-provoking presentations across a broad spectrum of OTT-related topics from thought leaders across our industry. Today, we're pleased to have with us two experts in the field of quality assurance for media and entertainment, both from Eurofins Digital Media Services. Josh Erkman, who is EVP of Strategic Operations, and Rafael Morozov, who is the CTO of Eurofins. Josh has been leading organizations in strategy and operations for quality assurance for over 15 years, including executive roles at Testronic, MyIMedia, and now Eurofins. Rafael is an entrepreneur, technology architect, and an organizational leader. He's founded numerous startups and led technology organizations for over 20 years. Eurofins have been great supporters of OTT.X, including substantial contributions to our recently published QC vocabulary. I know we're all looking forward to their talk today entitled The Evolving Role of QC in an OTT World, which will explore why QC is different in the OTT world, addressing QC bottlenecks with dynamic solutions and efficiencies in file deliveries and QC. Please welcome Josh and Rafael. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Josh Erkman, EVP of Strategic Operations at Eurofins Digital Media Services. And I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the evolving role of QC in an OTT world. So a little introduction about Eurofins. So Eurofins Digital Media Services was a film and TV content and media services company founded in 2004, originally as MyIMedia. And in October of 2017, MyIMedia was acquired by Eurofins Scientific and became Eurofins Digital Media Services. So who is Eurofins? The Eurofins Group has about 47,000 staff, has offices in 48 countries around the world, and provides testing services for a multitude of industries. And Eurofins Digital Media Services has provided testing and media services to all of the major film and TV studios, and today is a preferred vendor for the premier OTT companies. So we're located in Burbank, California. We have another facility in New York City. Both facilities are Dolby Vision and Atmos certified. We're highly secure, part of the Trusted Partner Network. And Eurofins Digital Media Services employs 165 employees worldwide. So a little about what we do. So we are a testing company. So in that we do master QC. So master QC, which is what we're going to primarily talk about, how that relates to OTT workflow. But what is master QC? So master QC, we're testing ProRes files, we're testing TIFF sequences in that. And I'm going to go into some further detail on all of that in a little bit. But we also do streaming and electronic sell-through QC. iTunes files, the redemption of iTunes files. Once a video has been encoded and is now available on a streaming platform, we're doing QC on that. Localization QC, so that's something where we have native speakers working around the world to ensure that the quality of the subtitles and the dubbed audio above the highest standard. Artwork QC, where we're testing what the key art on an OTT platform may look like. Standards and practices QCs. We also do a lot of DVD, Blu-ray, and UHD Blu-ray QC. In addition to QC, we also do a lot of technical and archival services. So whether that's making an IMF package or any other of the myriad of deliverables that might be required, whether it's a screener, a servicing master, and so on. So I'm assuming if you've joined this webinar, you probably know a little bit about QC, but for those of you that don't, what is QC? Well, it isn't just catching issues like this, and I apologize in advance to any of our friends from HBO that might be on this webinar. But QC is, and in this instance, master QC is really a thorough analysis of the integrity of the master audio and video assets. So when we're doing that, we're using both automated tools and experienced QC operators, and those master files are tested for potential technical specification and content issues. So what's a technical specification issue? Well, it can include any issues with the video's aspect ratio, any framing issues that may have been introduced when it was edited or there were VFX applied, any peak level issues, any issues with the audio configuration. So are you actually getting sound out of the left channel rather than the right channel? And then content issues. So that can include anything from, as we can see, visible production equipment or visible crew. Is that like a reflection of a cameraman in a window? Any audio ticks. Rustling of like a lavalier mic, any dead pixels that were introduced from a camera sensor. And so when someone is doing a master QC, what's actually happening? So during a master QC, an operator is sitting in a specialized QC bay that's outfitted with professional audio and video playback equipment, scopes, audio meters. And when they're doing a QC, an operator can be testing the high dynamic range version, the Dolby Vision version, the standard dynamic range version. They could be testing the original aspect ratio file. They could be testing the crop down 178 aspect ratio file. They could be doing a pass on the Atmos audio. They could be doing a pass on the 5.1 audio. They could be focusing on just the stereo audio or the music and effects channels. And then depending on the QC request, there can be as many as 200 plus issues. So you can imagine that over the course of a feature, there's many things that you can encounter. And with this, there are different levels of QC. So we work with our clients to determine the best approach given the budget situation to ensure that their content is of the highest quality. So not everything has the same budget that the Avengers might have, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you want your content to go out in subpar quality. So to set a baseline here, I kind of wanted to talk to you and show you a little bit about what the typical master QC workflow looks like. And this is how it's been traditionally, and we'll go into a bit about how it's been evolving later in the presentation. But the first step is the post facility sends the file for QC. So depending on what type of file this is and the runtime of the content, projects can be as large as 10 plus terabytes. So as you can imagine, that's a huge file or series of files, and transfers like that can take a very long time. So once these files have been received, is then ingested into our storage. So while this is happening, various automated processes are performed to prepare these files for QC. So when they're moving to our high-speed storage, they're being tagged for internal media asset management. We're running an MD5 checksum, which is to confirm that all of the files that we were supposed to receive in that transfer actually were received without issue. And then we're also creating any proxy files that we may need to use to help augment the QC. Once everything is ready to go, then we actually are going to be doing the QC. So during this QC, I had mentioned earlier that there's an automated component of this. So automated component is where we're testing for photosensitive epilepsy tests, LKFS measurements, for audio compliance, and then just any general file specs. So we find that that is a good way where the automated QC tools that may be out there can help really augment the QC process. And then we're also doing the manual QC of the file. So that manual QC, which I talked about earlier, is when the operator is reviewing the file. So, and the number of QC passes that they're doing is really dictated by the audio configuration and the video type. So once we've done this QC, we've generated our QC report. That QC report is then delivered to the post-production supervisor on the show, as well as the studio and OTT platform. So at that point, the post-production supervisor in the studio, they have a dialogue and determine what fixes will be made to the revised file. So those video and audio fixes are then going to be made by the post team, and at which point new files then are going to be sent back to us to be re-QC'd. So again, same process, the new files are received and ingested, and this could be something like a patch fix to a large TIFF sequence, or it could be an entirely new file. So once we then have that file prepared for QC, we then do that additional QC where we're confirming that all of the revisions that were made have been properly implemented and have been fixed, as well as really testing to make sure that no issues have been introduced, any new issues have been introduced to these new files. So now that we have a final approved master file, and it's deemed a pass by the post team and the OTT and studio platform, we create the final master file. So this could be an IMF package, this could be create a new ProRes XQ. So we create that file, and then it is ultimately delivered to the OTT platform via a secure file service like Aspera. So that's a very high level, simplified view of what a sort of traditional master QC workflow would be. So this workflow has its challenges. So premium offerings to customers on OTT services require premium services and support. So a lot to consider here. So large file movement and storage is a real challenge, and the entire supply chain of Post has this challenge. We're not unique in this by any stretch. So files are kept on local storage in our facility for months as we work on a season or a show or feature. We need to retain those elements to ensure that we have access to that as we're receiving fixes, or if we need to go back and cross-check one episode against another episode. And this all requires specialized equipment and infrastructure. So it's not just as simple as shipping somebody via FedEx a tape that they're going to pop into a deck. There's a lot that goes into being able to successfully play back these files. So then this requires a lot of investment and to support all of the various file types that you need to potentially be able to play back. And the hardware that's out there, some pieces of hardware are better at handling certain files. So you obviously need the right tool for the right job. But our clients are sending us all different types of files. So we need to be prepared to have the right tools. So the standards and offerings are constantly evolving, whether it's 4K or HDR or Atmos and other immersive audio formats, IMF standards. We need to make sure that we are on the cutting edge to be able to support our customers. So there's been an explosion of new OTT services, but along with that, there's an explosion of different workflows that we need to support. So there's a wide variance in platform specifications, QC requirements, file types. Every OTT platform has their own workflow, and we need to be able to help support that. So turnaround times also are more demanding than ever, as we oftentimes are working on an entire series of a show at the same time, because that will then be released at once rather than one episode at a time. And not only is the amount of content being produced higher than it has ever been, the number of various files created for a given episode or feature is staggering. Whether it's the different encodes for variable bitrate streaming that's happening, the various servicing files that are being created, it's just very overwhelming. And so with all of these demands, we started really thinking, like, how do you optimize the visibility and collaboration aspect of this throughout the supply chain? So you can imagine if there's 200+ issues on a QC report, for every one of those issues, there's likely a conversation that needs to happen. Is this issue approved? Are we fixing this? How much time is it going to take to fix this? Who's the other vendor that needs to be involved in that fix? Is that something that the QC company can do? Is that something that the audio vendor is going to do? And really think about, how do vendors, the actual production, the studio, OTT platform, how do they view the same issues and delivery milestones? So what we really start to see over the last couple of years is that the role that we had in QC really started to evolve. And we were really thinking about this. So as the QC vendor, we receive any fixes and then deliver the final approved master files to the OTT platform. So since we have the correct and final approved version, and because of our infrastructure, it's actually easy for us to perform other necessary services outside of that traditional QC workflow that I presented earlier. So there are other files that need to be created for various purposes. So for example, after a standards and practices QC, that new file that needs to be created needs to happen. So there's editing and creation of those new localized files. Screeners and proxies to be used in dubbing and subtitling workflows need to be created. Or split track master and other servicing files for use in marketing and other promos need to be created. So by having the QC vendor create these files, it actually saves valuable time, and it really minimizes errors by eliminating the need to send these large files back to another facility. So with all of this in mind, we really sat down and we asked ourselves, how do you successfully manage this new workflow? So at this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to my colleague, Raphael.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me. I'm just going to switch the screen sharing here. I'm assuming you can see my screen now. It should be in the same place.
Looks great, Raphael.
What was that? I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
I was just letting you know, it looks great.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Eric. So thank you, Josh, for setting me up like that. It's actually somewhat apropos because this is similar to the way that the organization is structured, right? The business needs to keep doing what they need to keep doing to continue operating and servicing the clients and addressing every client need and saying no as little as possible. And it's up to us on the operations side and the technology side to be able to actually bring this together and see how we can help them and how we can assist them in doing this efficiently and effectively. I've been with the company for about 4 years now, a little over 4 years, and most of this change has happened directly in front of me, and it's been really interesting to see and kind of take a fresh look at the way that this all works and think about how can we really evolve as a company from a company that works essentially that worked essentially with a relatively small number of clients and relatively small number of workflows and lots of individual files to a company now that works with tons and tons and tons and tons of individual clients, a massive, massive exponential explosion in the number of files, and equally large explosion in the number of workflows. So how do we continue to do this very, very efficiently? How do we actually get this done? So the big thing is we kind of got together and we evaluated where this is all going, seeing the writing on the wall and seeing the proliferation of OTT, and came up with a mandate that we need to rethink everything. What does that really mean? Well, we need to look at it from two different perspectives. One of them is from the business process side, and one of them is from the technology side. Our goal was to aggressively apply innovation to all aspects of the QC process. So we wanted to reevaluate absolutely everything, take a look at the best possible way to move forward, make the appropriate decisions, and try to support the business in the best way possible. The keys to that, it really started from the business process side. And I'm a technologist, obviously. I'm the chief technology officer of the company. And for me, it's very easy to think of most solutions to problems like this being technical in nature, but really it's not quite that simple. It really has to start with the business process. We've been very fortunate to have the support of the business, both from the operations side and from the senior management side. The operations side has been really good about engaging with us and engaging with our clients. So collaboration was really, really key to us. We have regular weekly working sessions between the heads of the technology departments and the operations department. We evaluate every single step of the process and try to assess what can we do to make it better. How can technology really help out? Maybe in some cases it's a matter of changing the workflow from a non-technical standpoint. Where do we find opportunities for innovation? On the business process side, that meant really training up our staff, making sure that our staff is much, much more technical than they'd ever been in the past. Initially, when it comes to doing basic evaluations or watching content, that's one level of technical expertise. But as Josh has mentioned, since we're dealing with so many different types of projects, so many different types of files, so many different formats, our staff has really had to become much, much more technical, and this has been a big key for us. The second part was analyzing all the workflows, laying out the workflows for big clients, figuring out, and this has been especially true with OTT companies, because they are bringing a lot of new workflows and requirements to us, and they're evolving very, very quickly, and we need to evolve along with them. So in analyzing the workflows, doing value stream mapping, figuring out how do we become more efficient at dealing with existing workflows. And then finally, the client services team has been hugely helpful to us, and Josh heads up the client services team, and he's done a lot of client engagement. We've spoken with our clients a lot. This is something that we do very, very well. We really communicate with our clients, and we try to figure out what is it that they need from us. How can we help them? This isn't just, hey, do you guys want to do a QC for us? We want to be there to answer their questions. We want to be there to help them improve their workflows, to really work with them. And that's our thought process when we go into any of these engagements. From the technology side, there's been a lot of work done. I'm going to share a few of the things that we've been doing. I could really spend the next hour and a half talking about all the different pieces of technological innovation that we've attempted to implement. But I'm just going to cover some that I think are really, really important. And if anybody has any questions or wants to continue to speak about this, then by all means reach out afterwards. I'd be happy to talk to you guys and explain all of the things that we're doing. But internal tooling has been huge. So just as a one-off example, Dolby Vision metadata needs to be analyzed. There are some tools for this, but they don't necessarily all work for the way that we need to work. So identifying issues in Dolby Vision metadata required us to build internal tooling used only by our team that can go and flag some of these issues. And there's a wide variety of these tools, and I'll cover a couple of them in a minute. Upgrading the facility and making sure that we do have the infrastructure to be able to support all of these advanced workflows and the new explosion of files. As of now, we just our high-speed storage playback, our high-speed SAN is somewhere around 1.5 petabytes usable. So we're dealing with a lot of space, a lot of throughput, and we need to make sure that all of that can be played back at the same time, right? We have many bays that need to be playing back this content at the same time. So dealing with the facility upgrades, making sure the facility is up to snuff, so to speak, has been huge. And then the final piece of this has been client-facing products. We've done quite a bit in terms of building client-facing products, building products that allow our clients to better interact with us, better understand our services, and get a better grip on it. And I'm going to cover some of that in the following slides. Implementation of this has been difficult, but I feel like we've done a really good job, and we've come very far. A lot of this is because of the support of our upper management, and it takes a tremendous amount of time and capital investment to be able to do this, to do a lot of research and development. But we kind of hammer away at it. We invest the time and capital, we measure the results, we improve, we make small implementation changes, we measure again, we rinse, repeat, and we keep going that way. So I'd like to talk to you about some of these tools, like I mentioned. But by the way, this is a fresh screenshot, so you'll see some of the client names and project names are redacted, so it's not the prettiest screenshot, but hopefully you guys get the idea. So one of the big problems, and Josh alluded to this, is dealing with the amount of content, both the number of files and the sheer volume of content in terms of the actual storage capacity that we have to deal with. We looked at a number of different products, and we actually even licensed one of the leading media asset management products. It's possible that the representative from it is even on the call. If I mention the name, you guys would probably all know the name of the company. And spent a lot of time trying to figure out, how do we get to the point where in real time, members of any functional area, whether it's client services or operations, or obviously our QC operators themselves, how do they know which files are here, which files aren't here, whether we have the right version of a file. Josh, for example, mentioned earlier in his workflow description that in that typical mastering workflow slide, he kind of mentioned patches. Well, this is a really big deal. So if you're dealing with a project that's a tip sequence of a full feature, right? We're talking probably about 100,000 plus frames. Those are 100,000 individual files, probably tips. They're probably about 60 megabytes each. And when you receive a patch, you're maybe receiving a few hundred new ones. How do you make sure that they go into the right place? How do you make sure that the old ones are appropriately tagged? How do you make sure that you keep track of all of them? As many of you probably know, we have a contractual obligation to our clients to securely track and manage every file. So when we have a piece of client content, it's hugely important for us to have that file tracked and to know exactly where it is, to know that when we actually QC something, we're QCing the latest version, to know that when we actually send the content off to the OTT platform, that we send them the correct version. To do this, we spent a better part of 1.5 years building out our own media asset management system that gives us a real-time view into every file that exists in our facility, what shape it's in, what work order it's tied to, what version it is, and you can see it here, through the MD5 checksum. Allow it to be searchable in seconds, so you should just be able to type in a file name or a project name and immediately know where things are. And that eliminates a lot of the back and forth, a lot of the questions. We noticed early on that as our client base was exploding, there were many instances where the operations team or the client services team were trying to figure out, hey, did this file land already? Because the clock starts as soon as the file lands, and we need to make sure that we're hitting our deadlines. So to do this, we really had to embrace automation. It's just not possible, obviously, for human beings to keep track of all of this. And unfortunately, even the tools that were on the market didn't quite do this in real time. They couldn't quite track every single file in real time the way that we needed it to. And we've had to do quite a bit to be able to build this thing out. The next piece was file transfers. So again, as Josh alluded to, transferring these files, it takes a very long time. At any point in time, we have probably a half dozen to a dozen files coming into our facility that are being transferred. We have a number of files that are being uploaded from our facility. So how do we automate this? How do we get to the point where we know the status of every file while it's being downloaded, where it is in the ingest process? How do we actually get that level of clarity and know when it's going to arrive, right? Do we know that when we can start a QC on a given project that maybe is on a rush and we have 24 hours to turn it around? And we know that just copying it from our landing spot to our secure SAN is going to take a couple of hours, perhaps. Running it through automated tests is going to take a couple more hours. How do we make sure that we hit those deadlines? So to do that, we built a lot of tooling to integrate with the Spera, Spera Connect, and a number of the other leading transfer tools and platforms to be able to build a single screen view that all of both our data IO operators who are responsible for looking at this day and night, and the rest of our staff can have a really clear idea of where the stuff is. One of the latest innovations in this respect is being able to actually tag and assign a file and link it to a work order prior to it ever landing. So the moment we see that a file is on its way to us, we can now associate it with a work order, and then the moment it's ready, it'll go through a number of different steps. And you can kind of see that here. I don't know if I took a great screenshot here, but you can see that on the right side, there's an actions pane. So for every file, as soon as it lands, it automatically goes through a number of different steps, like linking to our internal inventory management system, running media info and barcoding, and so on and so forth, copying it to the appropriate locations. So rethinking file transfers was a really, really, really big thing for us, and we're still evolving in that area, but it's helping to reduce this time to QC that is kind of one of the most important measures for my department here. That is the place where we can be of the most help to operations, because they do a fantastic job once the file lands and they're ready to actually start working and doing their QC. They're great at that. They've been doing it for over a decade, probably closer to 12, 14 years now. But how do we get that file to them? How do we actually get it to the point where they can start working immediately? The next piece I just wanted to kind of mention is the ingest process. Again, this seems like boring bread and butter stuff, but this is really the key. We took a look at some of the numbers, and over 30% of the total time spent on a given work order had to do with data IO related tasks. This is copying, this is ingesting, this is doing audio extraction, various other things. So we built tooling to automatically identify the file as it comes in, suggest to our data IO operators, these are the types of tasks that you want to perform in the file, set up the file for movement between the facilities. As Josh mentioned, we have a facility in Burbank and we have another facility in New York. So if different facilities are working on parts of a given project, they need to be appropriately shipped securely from one place to another. The metadata needs to exist in all places. So all of this happens in an automated manner through our internal systems. The next piece I want to talk about is client interaction. To me, coming into this industry, and I didn't come from a post-production background when I joined this company, a lot of this was a learning process. And it was really interesting to me to see how a QC project actually gets initiated, and how do we get to the finish line. And it's, to me at first, it seemed a little like getting a contractor for your house. You get a number of different quotes, you negotiate, you know that this is going to be a big purchase. Eventually, you probably go with somebody that you think is going to be good enough to be able to do the job well, and they're going to hold your hand, and they're going to be the experts, and they're going to walk you through everything. And while that process works really well, and it's worked for us for a very long time, and it's really helped us build very strong relationships with our clients and become subject matter experts and help guide our clients to the right place. One of the things that was lacking, it seemed like, and that really needed to happen now that the number of clients and number of files and number of projects has exploded, is giving the clients control of the QC process. So we built a tool called QC on Demand. This is our client-facing platform. And this is one way that our clients can actually kind of put their hands on the QC process. They can see what's going on. These are not just now a series of individual quotes and responses and emails and phone calls. This is now a cohesive, cohesive view into a client's QC pipeline and all of the things that surround it. So I'm going to talk a little more about how we put the client in control of the QC process through something called we call QC profiles, and that's really kind of stemming from the different requirements and different specs of every OTT provider. But just suffice it to say that this is a big step toward giving our clients control over the process. So what did we do? We wanted to, one of the things that we noticed is many times we see the same issue pop up over and over and over again. And what happens when issues pop up? Oftentimes clients need to get it fixed, and when the clients need to get it fixed, they need to get it re-QC'd. And while that's great for us because that's continuing, that's continual work for us, it's really not fantastic for our clients. It takes a tremendous amount of time. Sometimes, we've seen instances where for some credit changes, we've had to re-QC things 5-6 times, and that's a really big problem for our clients because the budgets are tight. As you can imagine, when you're dealing with a massive number of projects at the same time, and that's one of the things that came out of the OTT explosion, you need to control costs for every project. You can't spend as much per project, both in terms of time and in terms of capital investment. So you really need to understand what are we seeing over and over again? Are we seeing the same type of issue pop up again and again and again and again? How do we get better at it? Are we seeing that maybe with a given production, we just keep having to fix dead pixels over and over and over again from episode to episode? Maybe we need to reach out to them and make sure that they change their process a little bit and they check the camera more thoroughly before every shoot. Pricing transparency is another thing that we wanted to bring to our clients. So obviously, our clients know exactly how much they're going to pay for every QC. Everything is negotiated beforehand. Many of them have a rate card. But how do you get that top-down view? How do you see how much you're really spending over a period of time on a given project, on a given show from season to season, with a given partner? We wanted to kind of bring all that to our clients. So we show them right up front, this is how much you're paying for fixing and re-QCing something. This is how much you're paying per project. This is how much you're paying for projects from a given client. We also allow you to get instant quotes on everything. So even though we're always happy to pick up the phone when a client calls us or sends us an email and quote it out for them, we give the clients the opportunity to, in a few clicks, go through and just put in the specifications of the file, pick a spec that they're targeting, pick a distributor they're targeting, get an immediate quote. Collaboration is a really big deal, and I'm going to show you that in a couple of slides. I think Josh did a really nice job talking about all the different players in the ecosystem and how every issue really needs to go through a prism. And there are several cooks in that kitchen. And they may have competing demands. Somebody may want to just get this out, quote unquote. Somebody may want to ensure that the quality associated with a brand is high enough, so they don't want to get it out. There are a lot of competing interests, and there are a lot of voices. And what you want to make sure is that all of those voices don't get buried in an email somewhere. So when some mistake is made at some point in the future, people aren't digging through their emails for a PDF file of a QC report that was annotated in pen and then scanned in or taken a photo of with their iPhone and then sent back to us where they said approved, right? That's something that you're never ever going to find, or you're going to spend a tremendous amount of time trying to look for that, trying to figure out whose fault it was, trying to figure out how to get better in the future. So we wanted to bring collaboration directly into the platform and bring the discussion to the issues. And then finally, scheduling. Traditionally, when we deal with our clients, and this has always been the case, and primarily prior to the QC window, our main concern is that from the moment that we receive the content, we have X hours or days to complete our work. So we need to turn around our project in 24 hours or 48 hours, and we need to get back to the client in that period of time. This has changed quite a bit with the world of OTT. And again, I think Josh did a nice job alluding to this, especially when an entire season needs to be posted at the same time. Now the schedule is much more complicated. Now you need to make sure that all of the episodes are done by a certain date. And our clients told us that they kind of wanted to get a view beyond just the QC window. So showing them how things are doing within that 24-hour or 48-hour window is nice, but then they have to refer to a number of different systems and schedules where they're tracking the rest of the schedule of the actual production and post-production process and delivery process. So we wanted to kind of expand that and let our clients, we may not know all of the additional milestones that happen outside of the QC window, but if we just let our clients kind of plot that and set some offsets and decide, QC needs to be done no less than 10 days or no more than 10 days before the final posting date. And then they add they add some milestones around that, perhaps before, perhaps after. They can actually start getting visibility as to when a project is sliding, even before it ever gets to QC. One of the big things about giving clients control over the QC process was this concept of QC types or QC profiles, as we call it. A QC profile is essentially a spec for a given distributor, or it could be a custom spec that you create yourself. And it allows you to really define what level of QC is going to be done, how it's going to be done, and how it's going to look once it's completed. So that means that you can customize QC definitions, you can customize your terminology, your severities, your scheduling. So, for example, perhaps you want to see a specific issue labeled a different way on your reports. Perhaps something is of a lesser severity because of where this content is being distributed. Maybe it depends on the content type. If something is shot, with a handheld camera, and that's how it's intended, then maybe certain types of artifacts that we would find are not quite as important for that piece of content. Maybe it's going to mobile only. Maybe it's going to your website where you have a completely different set of standards than something that's perhaps going to either a major OTT provider or it's going to broadcast. So we had to, again, kind of sit back and rethink, well, what do we do? Do we train our operators to work differently for every single client? That's obviously a recipe for disaster, considering how many clients we have. Do we make our operators learn every single spec individually and try to understand that I need to name this type of artifact, pixel error here, or dead pixel there? That also seemed completely unmanageable. So one of the things that we tried to do is we allow our clients to go in there and customize what we call QC profile or QC type and say, this is what the final output is going to look like. Now, that allows us on the operations side to be able to do the work that we've always done. We can just go through and our operators find artifacts the way they always have. And once those artifacts are entered, the output to the client is one that they want to see. So it already has the appropriate terminology and appropriate severities, and all of the things associated with it are to the client's individual specification. So it really gives them a lot of control over this process. And this is important both for the client, because again, their jobs are becoming much more complicated because they're dealing with so many more pieces of content and so many more different distribution channels. And it's also important for us because from a scalability standpoint, it's really, really, really valuable for us to be able to empower the client so that we can do much, much better servicing the client in areas where they can't do anything to help themselves. So anything they could do to help themselves, we want to put in their hands. And this is something that could get a little complex, so we can manage the QC profiles for them, or they can manage it themselves. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is the QC report. So I don't know how many of you on the call have seen a QC report. I can tell you all about it. A QC report is typically either a PDF, most often for us it's PDF. Sometimes it's just an Excel sheet with a number of different issues. So these are the findings. These are the 200 plus issues that Josh has defined. So if you can imagine the workflow of yourself getting this PDF and then needing to comment on it and to tell us that issue number 34 is perhaps approved, and then you need to get the studio to approve it as well, and then you maybe need to get the distributor to chime in on it. This becomes very, very, very complicated. So we figured, let's dump the PDFs. Let's be really, really radically rethinking the way that this works. So let's start with no PDFs. Let's give you a nice, simple online form, something that you're completely used to in other areas outside of the QC world. Let you look at your issues in a holistic way. Let you look at them from version to version. Let you say, you know what, I want to look at just the severity 3 issues that perhaps haven't been fixed, and just click a couple of buttons and immediately get that kind of response. The next thing is what we've touched on a couple of times now, is the collaboration. How do we bring the collaboration discussion directly to an issue? So you can see in this example, perhaps, I don't know how well you guys could see this, but perhaps there was an issue that said that the effects are out of sync, and immediately a client was able to log in and say, you know what, I looked at this in the day, this seems totally fine. Or, this audio tick, I actually don't hear this. Can you guys confirm? Or maybe down here, there's a VFX error, right? There's a blue line somewhere. And the client says, I don't see it. Why don't you send me a high-res image and point out where exactly this happens? This is fantastic because it gives visibility to everybody within the ecosystem, all the different parties from multiple different partners that are interacting with this piece of content. They can all look at it in the same place and talk about it. And then finally, the people that need to approve it can approve it. The next piece is reviewing issues on the go. So you can imagine, again, many of you on this call probably have been in the situation where it's, it's close to the deadline, to the release, end of the release window, the deadline to get a piece of content out is upon you. It's now 10:30 p.m. and you finally got home and you get that notification, you get that email saying, here's your PDF report, the QC is done. And there's an issue, it says production crew equipment is visible. So what do you do with that? Do you drop everything and get a babysitter and run back to the studio and get a bay and take a look at it? Do you wait until the next day? Maybe that's not really possible. How do you figure out how big of an issue this is? Well, one of the things that we decided to do is, why don't we allow our clients on the fly, using a watermarked secure proxy, to take a look at the issue immediately. And this could be done on a computer. This could be done on your mobile device. I actually don't have a screenshot of the mobile device here, but it's very, very similar. So you can immediately take a look and say, you know what, yeah, I guess that's a camera crew in the background, but I know that I have to go live with this week, and it's really not noticeable. I think I could just approve this issue, right? I don't need to go to a bay. I don't need to spend all that extra time. I don't need to spend the money on reserving a bay. I can just get this over with and move on. So this has been a really, really big innovation for us. Our clients have the ability to say on a project-by-project basis whether or not they want this. So obviously, security is a really, really big issue. So if a client doesn't feel comfortable with a proxy, even a watermark proxy of their content being accessible anywhere outside of our facility, and that's often the case, then they don't have to do this. You can also dive deeper, right? You saw an example a couple of slides ago of the client requesting, you know what, I really want to see a high-res image. Well, right through the system, you just click a button and you say, I want to request a high-res image. You get a high-res screenshot from it. And then finally, for those who really, really, really don't like change and really love their PDF reports, well, we decided to leave the PDF reports as well, because obviously the client is always right. And we know that the level of adoption of new technology, it varies from organization to organization. And even though we truly, truly believe this is the path forward, we know that it'll take some time for some of our clients to get to that point, and that's perfectly fine as well. The same data is still going to flow into the same system. You'll still get your PDF report, but if you ever decide to go back and take a look at your issues in a different format, or to do analysis across a number of issues or across a number of projects that you've done in the past year, you can always do that as well. So this is just a couple of the things that we've done. And again, like I mentioned at the beginning of my portion of the talk, I can probably speak for the next 2 hours about all the different things that we're trying to do. I wanted to touch on just a couple of basic ones that we do internally and client-facing, but there's really quite a bit more. We have a lot of ideas. We've done a lot, but I'm sure you guys have had a lot of ideas as well. We would love to get your feedback. We would love to know how do our solutions fit into the problems that you're seeing? Perhaps your problems are not just in the QC area. Perhaps your problems are in other areas that are tangential to us, and we can work together and we can figure out how do we bridge this gap from an older, more static world of single pieces of content, slow turnaround times, individual project engagement, to what OTT has brought about, which is lots of files, lots of projects, lots of workflows delivered at the same time, needing to go out there immediately, and obviously at a budget rate. So at this point, I want to just kind of throw it over to you guys and back to Eric. If you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any of these questions. I'm sure Josh was as well. So throwing it back to you guys.
Hey, thanks a lot, Raphael and Josh. Really fascinating look under the hood of your system. It's great to see the incredible innovation. QC has really come a long way. And it's great to see what y'all are doing. We do have a couple of questions. So why don't I get things kicked off? Here's one. Are you providing DCP QCs? So are you doing digital cinema QC?
Yes.
There we go. Any other? Is there any? Are there any particular challenges associated with that type of a QC process?
In terms of DCP QC, for us, it really isn't that different from what we would typically do in a master QC. So we're looking out for a lot of the same types of issues. You know, really for us, it's about, you know, viewing that in the viewing environment. So doing it in a theater. And so we have some partnerships with some other post companies where, you know, we'll do those QCs out of those post facilities.
Awesome. Here's a question. We have a attendee who's raised their hands, and I'm going to reward them by giving them a chance to join us and talk as well. So, Severson, let's see. If
hey, Eric, how's it going? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, Josh and Raphael, thank you very much for the presentation. This is Sean Evertson. I'm the EST scheduling manager at In Demand. And Josh, good to hear from you. We used to work together. Good. Very cool. I've been looking forward to this presentation, so we'll have to catch up later. But I wanted to ask in general, at the start of the talk, did you guys say you have 47,000 employees globally?
Yes, that Eurofins Scientific is a very large global company. So cool. Eurofins Digital Media Services is a division within that.
Awesome, awesome. So here's what I'd like to hear more about. As you know, I've worked with Josh at Testronic Labs, and I have that QC background. Since moving on from there, I've been more of like the operations management side of thing. And QC is something that gets brought up a lot as in terms of like cost cutting and automating and using technology to move away from eyes on glass as we used to do like 10 plus years ago. So I'm just wondering if you could elaborate on, at this point in 2020, like what are human beings working on, and how are you leveraging technology? What's being automated in a technology standpoint? And what are people still looking at, just in general? I know it's different all over the place, but especially with all the notes you mentioned about the increase of different clients, lead times, you know, the urgency of things, and the different specs, like just how has that evolved since I've moved away from the QC world pretty much over the past 10 years? But like, where's the delta and integration between what humans are actually doing and what like automated systems are doing?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, Sean. So one of the things that, you know, we've been doing over the years is, you know, we use a combination of those automated tools as well as, you said, eyes on glass, you know, and human beings in a QC bay. We've spent a lot of time and a lot of R&D on some of the automated tools out there. And what we've found is that certain aspects are really good. So there's certain things that obviously, like, we need to do a PSE test. That's an automated test, and that's something that we need to do. We need to be able to check the actual file spec, and so that's something that an automated process was really good at. But where we've seen some issues where if you wanted to use some automated tools for, let's say, dead pixel detection, there's some good tools that are out there. But we've found in some of our research that a lot of that, there's a lot of false positives that still come up. So you end up spending more time looking at incorrectly identified issues and trying to suss out what's a real issue and what's just maybe not an accurate reporting of the automated tool. So, you know, an automated tool isn't going to be great at catching a reflection or a boom mic dipping down into the frame. You know, those are the types of things where we need to have, you know, a human doing that part of the QC. So I think that, you know, as the tools continue to improve, there's going to be things that, you know, we'll continue to use those automated tools for. But I think that to have, like, on a master level, you know, we're talking about, you know, you know, if you're creating multiple deliverables down the line, you know, that's where maybe automated tools would make a lot more sense. But in terms of talking about the actual master file, we think it's really important that you have someone that's highly trained and has eagle eyes and great ears that's still testing that content.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit to that from a technology standpoint. I think that there's a distinction, and there's kind of there's a point of diminishing returns when it comes to automation. And there are certain things that automation is really good at. And there are certain things that it's getting better at, especially using machine learning and various computer vision techniques. So there are a number of issues that we could identify already using some of these techniques, and we've done some testing on this. So could we recognize a boom mic? Yeah, perhaps. But do we know for a fact that that's an artifact? One of the things that we've noticed in the research that we've done so far, and this is one of the reasons that we've really focused on the logistics around QC in terms of automation rather than the QC process itself, is that machines are not very good at this point at understanding intent. And that's really the key. Human beings are very, very good at watching an episode and understanding that something is out of place. So yes, there's a camera in the shot, but it's supposed to be in the shot, right? This is a key to what is currently going on. So even though there's a number of things that we could detect automatically, we want to get to a point where an automatic pass through a piece of content is actually going to give us enough confidence that an operator no longer needs to go and spend that same amount of time afterwards re-reviewing it. So I think the evolution of this will kind of come in steps. We're already seeing portions of this process being automated. We're seeing certain areas where technology is really, really good. And Josh mentioned some of them, which is, for example, understanding the technical conformance of individual pieces of data, the metadata associated with them, making sure that certain things that look like they should be errors in terms of metadata or portions of the actual package, those things are getting much, much better, but it'll be some time before we can really say, you know what, we're going to do an automated pass and be really, really confident that none of the intent was missed, right? That a shadow, which, is really a shadow of a boom mic, which I, as an untrained person, even though I've been now in the QC world for a little while, could never even notice, but a trained operator sees immediately. That's something that a machine is really not going to be able to do anytime soon.
Excellent, thanks. Well, I have time for one more question for y'all, and this is really just, can you give us an example of one of the most crazy, just out of the ordinary, or just kind of audacious QC issues that you can remember seeing?
That's a really tough one.
Let me ask you another one then. Here, how about how does it happen that a Starbucks cup ends up in a released version of a very, very well-known television show?
Well, I can't speak to the actual circumstances around all of that. But, one thing that I can say is that, the more you look at something, the more things that you end up seeing. So, I think that it's fully understandable, having been doing QC for, 15, 16 years, how something like that can happen, because you can sometimes be focused on all of these other technical things that are happening. There's so much to be considering when you're doing a master level QC, that sometimes the thing that's obvious to someone isn't necessarily really what's important.
Yeah, I can imagine that in, probably in a lot of content, there's stuff like that. And we just don't notice it because it's not as high of a visibility of a television show, or maybe people just wouldn't care as much. And so there are a lot of things that can go wrong in video, and they continue to. So it's great that y'all are here to help the industry in resolving those. It's great seeing the wonderful work you're doing in the space, and super interesting. With that, I want to close up our session for today and thank everybody for jumping on with us to this edition of the OTT.X Wednesday webinar series. Session was recorded and it's going to be available on the OTT.X channel on YouTube. The PowerPoint presentation is going to be available for OTT.X members on our site at OTT.X.org under Industry Research Presentations. I hope you'll join us for the next session of our series, which is on June 3rd, entitled, What is Ad-Supported Linear OTT TV? And how does it fit into my distribution strategy, which will be presented by George Roche, who is the VP of Product and Distribution at Blue. As always, you can register for this webinar at the OTT.X site under Events and Programs. I'm going to put the link to the registration page into the chat window, so you can jump right onto that right now if you'd like. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us today, and I hope you'll have a great rest of your day.